when the hero is too generic to be relatable. What do you think of when I say to you shonen protagonist, a character that is idealistic, stubborn, feels very strongly about their beliefs, wants to achieve some lofty goals such as reaching a position of power or prestige, or fulfilling a personal goal such as defeating an enemy or finding or saving a loved one? Most of the time they are unwilling to kill or will do so only as an absolute last resort. They are usually ignorant of social cues, and most of their intelligence is relegated to combat. Oftentimes, their power will tie in to directly how emotional they are feeling at the moment. The more angry and determined they are, the stronger they get, and they are usually very powerful, in some cases ridiculously so. That being said, I feel like there's a bit of a weird circle jerk around who's considered a generic shonen protagonist and who isn't, and no one really knows what they are talking about. Like I said, I haven't seen every single shonen anime out there, but all of the popular ones I could think of, with the exceptions of Death Note, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Gintama, One Punch Man, and Soul Eater, fit that description. Note that two of these series, One Punch Man and Gintama, are parodies of the shonen genre, and Death Note is a completely different brand of shonen altogether, so that just leaves JoJo and Soul Eater as the only two who are actual straight shonen. My point is, the criteria is too vague to determine who's stereotypical and who isn't. Deku and Tanjiro get criticized for being generic, yet other characters like Emma from The Promised Neverland and Edward Eric aren't considered generic, and Edward totally fits all the categories of generic shonen protagonist. It's just that he is more fleshed out than the others. And this has more to do with the actual writing of Fullmetal Alchemist as opposed to Edward's character design, although Emma and Edward aren't incredibly powerful, so that's something. Heck, Eren is a generic shonen protagonist. He's just a darker version, like what happens when a shonen protagonist completely falls into despair. And no, I'm not talking about Season 1 Eren. I'm talking about manga No Mercy route Eren, the one with the man bun. He's a shonen protagonist, approached from a fresh angle, but people are acting like he's suddenly better than all of the others just because he commits war crimes. In my admittedly limited experience, most battle shonen protagonists either have some amount of grayness to them or they're unrealistic. For the former, the best example I can think of is Hunter x Hunter's Gon, a character purposefully written with an inconsistent and childish sense of morality. For Gon, morally good is whoever he likes and finds interesting, and morally bad is whoever he doesn't. His friends are all good, and anything they do is good. Anyone who gets in the way is bad, and anything they do is bad. He lacks the ability to understand gray morality, and that bad people can do good things and vice versa. If the phantom trope kills innocent people, it's bad, but when he threatens to do it, it's deserved. He's by no means unrealistically good, it's just that his sense of morality is questionable and immature. I know other shonen protagonists have at least some similarities. I know for sure that Goku isn't a wholly good person. For the latter, My Hero Academia's Deku is a great example. The reason I find him to be an interesting character is because he's the essence of idealistic heroism, but taken to its illogical extreme. Sure, he is unrealistically morally good, but it's to the point of unnecessarily destroying himself to save people and killing himself over an inability to live up to the impossible ideal of a hero he has in his mind thanks to his idol. This aspect of his character is criticized and considered to be representative of larger problems of a society where heroism is integrated into a capitalist structure. This unrealistic moral goodness is, well, unrealistic and also dangerous, and I'm sure there are many other shonen protagonists with self-destructive hero complexes. I know this show is not alone in that. Likewise, characters with no killing policies are often criticized for similar reasons, like Ed from Fullmetal Alchemist. My experience is that characters with unrealistically idealistic morals are made to face reality and learn that the world is more complicated than they think. While some people do need to take from their idealistic views in order to create a basis for creating progress, these characters have the opposite problem in that they need to see that they're naive and that they're going about things the wrong way. Funnily enough, it's for that reason that I actually found Tanjiro's radical empathy kind of refreshing. Tanjiro has a heart of gold and an empathetic soul that saves people he comes across who are suffering. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. The world is a bad place, and empathy marks the way forward, even if empathy alone will never solve the root of the problem. I found found it pretty endearing and interesting in its own way. This is how I've personally seen the subgenre. I think it's generally accepted now, the idea that we should never kill people because it puts us on the same level. It's definitely a cliche in some stories, but others, like some shonen battle series and other fantasy action stories, call it out as such. Sometimes utilitarianism wins out, and killing a villain responsible for horrible crimes is not morally equivalent to killing innocent civilians or committing mass genocide. Media nowadays often recognizes that fact. Well, all shonen are designed to feel good power fantasies, so having a main character to question things doesn't particularly work in that favor. How would a child idolize someone like Deku from My Hero Academia if he had no issues hurting people to achieve things? That being said, most main characters fall on one or the other end of the spectrum. They are either full-on angelic good guys or extremely edgy individuals willing to do questionable things. Some characters end up in the middle and make for some very interesting stories. To name just a few, Kiyotaka from Classroom of the Elite, whose moral compass is questionable but not edgy. Hachiman from Oregairo, decent moral compass but willing to do questionable things to achieve his desired outcome. I agree that it makes him even more idealistic, but there were some major changes, though I never said that these characters changed because of the story arc trope. Look at Gon. The rage moment was cool, but it was more of a showcase of the flaws of Gon's once idealized characteristics. After Gon is healed from sacrificing basically everything, he's no more different than he was before and still retains all of those flawed characteristics, which is what makes Hunter x Hunter pretty interesting. The reason why the Pain arc is so good in my opinion is because it's when Naruto's ideals and specifically his pure of heart characteristic are challenged head on, which is probably what would have happened to Gon if he had battled with the Ant King Midwing. I say it's one of my favorite arcs, probably the best arc in Naruto, purely because of Pain's dialogue and Naruto's defeat. I call it a defeat because Pain succeeded in shattering his ideals and forced Naruto to basically accept his vengeance against the Leaf. He also forced Naruto into a blind rage. Despite what he could have done to everyone in the village, Naruto had no answer for Pain. Naruto's character development and what changed was probably just him becoming more of an ideal Buddha. From then on, Naruto never resorted to the Nine Tails power and he was never provoked or angered, even when Neji died, which would be a discrepancy in Naruto's character traits if not for the Pain arc, since Naruto had always been controlled by the Nine Tails' anger when someone close to him died, like Hinata or Gaara. Basically, Obito was unable to break Naruto because Pain already did that to him, and that's called character development. If you want a good example of a morally grey shonen protagonist, Hunter x Hunter is a great example. There are some heart of gold characters, but they all have a shade of darkness to them. Most of them try to be moral, at least on the surface. For the young demographic, however, that can be just the surface. Tanjiro isn't the best example for my case, as he is a saint to some degree, but his start is by selfishly allowing a human-eating monster to live, his sister, because he can't fathom losing her. You never know when she could have eaten another human and there was no way to save her. Obviously, it's also believing in the other and whatnot. Better examples are Goku. In the original Dragon Ball, when Dragon Ball wasn't as bloody, Goku had much less restraint about killing others. He literally killed an entire evil organization. I feel like people just remember him in DBZ and forget that. Likewise, Luffy and Gon have their very questionable moralities that people take in stride without questioning. Is the criteria really too vague, or are shonen protagonists by and large generic enough that most of them fit the mold? Keep in mind, part of what makes the protagonist generic is that the story structure is usually pretty generic too. A character's role in the story is just as important as his abstractly described attributes, and when your character makes all the same choices in all of the situations he's likely to be put into, then he's going to come across as generic. Even he's theoretically different in some areas that don't really matter to the story. Some of the criteria can be revisited. With this in mind, the character represents broadly inoffensive positive beliefs such as friendship, loyalty, being nice to people, and etc. The series will endorse these beliefs and give the character a moral victory over his opponents. The protagonist will leave a goal that is compatible with the beliefs as outlined in point 1, and which will be broadly noble. If he wants power, it will be because he wants to improve the world. If he wants revenge, the person he wants it against will be an evil villain who must be defeated anyway. The goal will be something that he is pursuing only in a broad sense, with most of his storylines involving him reacting to the new villain, and he will accomplish his goal as a byproduct of saving the world. The character will be allowed to act naively without serious consequences. Villains who he defeats will turn into friends. Anyone who he needs to get revenge on will be irredeemably evil and will force him to kill them. The story will be more concerned with dramatic sweep than logic. Battles will be won by determination, willpower, and shouting moral pronouncements, rather than strategy, preparation, or previously established powers. And as always, the power of friendship will reign supreme. The series will involve a lot of power escalation, with a strong element of power fantasy, and will rely on the main character getting stronger to deliver a sense of narrative progress. That being said, when I think of a generic shonen protagonist, I think of someone like Natsu from Fairy Tail, and what strikes me about Natsu isn't the number of generic boxes he ticks, that there is nothing to the main character outside of those boxes. And there is nothing the story does that would shed light on any other side of his character. He's just those cliches, and really nothing more. By contrast, Saitama may fit a lot of those criteria, but he becomes non-generic simply because the story puts him in a different narrative structure. You can tack a lot of non-generic traits onto a character, and they won't really matter if none of them are relevant to the story. Bleach is a good example. Ichigo breaks the shonen protagonist mold in a lot of ways, but as the story goes along, it places him in an increasingly reactive role where he comes across as incredibly bland. It's about more than just, does the character check these boxes? It's about whether there's anything to them other than those boxes. It's about whether they make interesting and unique decisions that other characters in their place wouldn't make. It's about the structure of the story they're in and what aspects of their character have a chance to be shown. And that's it for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and ring the bell so you're notified whenever I post a new video. And the best way you can help me is by watching another video after this. That being said, thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.